She hid $1.3 million during the divorce. For 11 years, she kept a second set of financial records, a separate account, a separate life, built entirely in secret inside a marriage he thought was real. When he filed for divorce, she declared $84,000 in total assets. The forensic accountant found $1.3 million. And when the judge saw what she had done, he didn't just divide the assets. He did something that family court judges almost never do, something that changes everything about how this case ended. That is what this video is about. There is a specific moment. Most people can't describe it out loud, not because it's too painful, but because the words don't exist for what it actually felt like. It wasn't anger. It wasn't grief. Not yet. It was the moment you realized the story you had been living, the one where that person was safe, where you knew the shape of your own life. That story was not the one that had actually been happening. Somebody was writing a different version the entire time. And you were the only one who didn't know. If you are watching this right now, and I think I already know why you are, I want to ask you one thing, and I want you to sit with it before the answer comes. Who failed you that you thought you could trust? Maybe you found this channel because you are in the middle of it right now. A court date on the calendar. An attorney who doesn't seem to understand what you're actually asking. A process that nobody explained to you, that already made decisions about your life. Or maybe the case is over. The judge signed the order. Everyone else moved on. And you are still sitting here at night trying to figure out how it happened. How someone who was supposed to be your person did what they did. How the system that was supposed to see that didn't. Either way, I know why you're here. I'm not going to give you a lecture tonight. I'm not going to read you statutes. I'm going to sit here with you for the next 30 minutes and show you something I needed someone to show me a long time ago. What happened to you was not a one-time thing. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not bad luck. It was a pattern, and it's been documented. And you deserve to know that before any of this started. Stay with me. I want to tell you about someone I grew up with. I'm not going to use their name. They know who they are, and if they're watching this, which I hope they are, they know I mean this with everything I have. This was someone I watched build a life the right way. Showed up, worked hard, loved the people they were supposed to love, trusted the person they married the way you're supposed to trust the person you marry. Completely, with everything. And then over about 18 months, that person's life got taken apart. Not by a stranger, not by something that came out of nowhere. By the person sitting across the kitchen table from them every single morning, then by the legal process they turned to when they realized something was wrong. And then, and this is the part that stayed with me, by the system itself. The one that's supposed to exist for exactly this situation. I watched them try to explain what was happening to people who had never been inside a courtroom, people who said, "That's awful," and went back to their lives. I watched them come out of attorney meetings looking like they'd been spoken to in a language they'd never studied. I watched them file the paperwork, wait, and then watch what actually happened instead of what was supposed to happen. That experience did something to me. The anger came first, then something quieter moved in behind it. Not just anger at what happened to my friend, but a need to understand why it kept happening. Why it wasn't a rare story. Why every person I started talking to had their own version of it. So I started researching court records, published academic studies, federal government data, cases that created public record, Judicial Conduct Commission findings, Census Bureau reports on families. I went as far as the sources would take me. And what I found, and what I'm going to share with you across every video on this channel, is that what happened to my friend wasn't an accident. It wasn't a uniquely terrible situation. It was one case inside a documented system of patterns. Patterns that repeat, patterns that have names, patterns that people in positions of authority have written about in journals that almost nobody reads. Every source referenced in this video is linked in the description. I'm not asking you to take my word for anything. Look at what the record actually says. If your story belongs on this channel, a case, a pattern, something documented that the public needs to know about, there's a link in the description. Everything stays confidential unless you want it shared. That is why Deception Dossier exists. I need to show you something. One of the cruelest parts of a family court case is how alone it makes you feel. The other party moves through the process like they know something you don't. The attorneys speak in a language that needs translation. The judge has 47 other cases that week. And you're standing there holding something that is, to you, the center of your entire life. Here's what is actually true. 66 million cases move through state courts in the United States every single year, according to data compiled by the National Center for State Courts and published by the Pew Charitable Trusts in 2025. And family matters, divorces, custody, child support, are one of the most common reasons Americans end up inside a courtroom, not criminals. Families. The CDC reported 663,425 divorces in 2024. That is more than 1,800 families a day, every single day. Weekends included, holidays included, and in a large portion of those cases, children. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, more than 1/4 of all children under 21 in this country have a parent living outside their household. That's 21.9 million children. So growing up between two versions of a family that used to be one. And for the custodial parents raising those children, the ones with a legal child support order in place, fewer than half receive the full amount they're owed. 30%, 3 out of 10, receive nothing at all. Read that again. 3 out of 10 receive nothing in a system that issued the order, that has the legal authority to enforce it. 3 out of 10 families just fall through. And then there's how people actually feel inside this process. In 2024, the Pew Charitable Trusts ran a national survey of Americans with direct court experience. Nearly 1 in 4 gave the system a D or an F. Among those, 42% said the experience felt very unfair. And 45% said they trusted the court staff not at all. Not 1%, not fringe responses, almost half. Here's what nobody mentions when you're handing over the most important things in your life to a process you don't fully understand. In 72% of family court cases, at least one party has no attorney, none. They're walking into a system built around 2 lawyers negotiating with each other and arguing their own case in front of a judge who has a full afternoon after them. The system was designed assuming both sides would have attorneys. That stopped being true decades ago. Nobody changed the system. I'm not telling you this to make you feel worse. I'm telling you this because you deserve to understand the actual terrain before I show you what gets done inside it. What happened to you was not random. It followed a pattern. And that pattern has a name. What I'm about to walk you through exists in public record. These are not allegations. Not one person's version of events. Every case I'm about to reference went through the legal system and produced a documented outcome. Every pattern has been named in published academic research or official government data. There are 3 types of betrayal inside the American family system. And the reason I need to give them to you in this order is because most people only see the first one, the one right in front of them. Betrayal 1. The person you loved. The obvious answer is the person, the one you shared a home with, signed documents with, made decisions with, the one you believed was moving through life alongside you in the same direction. That's where most people land. And they're right, that's a real betrayal. But here's what the record shows about how far that betrayal can actually go. In December 1996, a woman in California got news that changed everything. She won a share of a $1,336,000 lottery jackpot. She had been married to the same man since 1971, 25 years. Within 11 days of finding out she'd won, she filed for divorce. Her husband signed the settlement papers. He had no idea the winnings existed. She'd been routing all correspondence to her mother's address. Nothing showed up in any of the filings he ever saw. He found out 2 years later, not from her, from a lottery buyout letter that went to the wrong address. The case went to court. The judge found intentional concealment and awarded her ex-husband 100% of the lottery winnings, every cent. Because she hadn't just deceived him, she had deceived the court. The case is public record. In Remarriage of Rossi, California Court of Appeal, 2001. But here's what stops me about that case every time I think about it. Not the money, the timeline. 11 days, she knew, she filed, and then she sat across from him. in mediation, in negotiations, in the courtroom itself, and let him sign documents that didn't include $1.3 million. The money can be traced. The money can go back. Betrayal 2, the process you trusted. The second betrayal is harder to see. I think that's by design. We are told from the beginning that the legal process is the safeguard, the thing you run to when something goes wrong. And it can be, that's what it's supposed to be. But family law practitioners, actual licensed attorneys who work inside these cases, have documented something, and they've given it a name. They call it the silver bullet method. Emergency protective orders exist for real reasons, legitimate reasons. There are people who genuinely need them, and they serve a vital function. I want to be clear about that. But here's what's also documented. In professional legal literature, published in Attorney at Law magazine in 2025, these orders can be filed on unsubstantiated allegations. Unlike other legal instruments, they don't require verified evidence at the point of filing. A judge required by law to err on the side of caution issues the order, and that order can separate a parent from their home and their children before a single fact is heard in court. The order starts at 3 weeks, but it can be extended and extended again all the way through proceedings, which means something filed on day 1 can shape the outcome of a case that takes years to resolve. So what happens when an allegation like that turns out to be unfounded? Currently, not much. The most serious academic research on this was federally funded and conducted at George Washington University Law School by Professor Joan S. Meyer. She looked at what happens inside family court cases where abuse allegations and parental alienation counterclaims appear in the same case. What she found is one of the hardest numbers in this research to sit with. When a father responded to a mother's abuse allegation with a parental alienation counterclaim, the mother was twice as likely to lose custody, not twice as likely based on evidence, twice as likely based on the counter-allegation alone. I know. The process is not always a safeguard. Sometimes, in documented federally funded research, the process is the weapon. Betrayal 3, the system you believed in. The third betrayal is the one most people never say out loud, because it requires you to say something that feels almost forbidden. What if the judge was wrong? Not wrong the way a human being is sometimes wrong, doing their best with incomplete information. Wrong in a way that required an official investigation. Wrong in a way that a state discipline board had to step in. Wrong in a way that ended with findings that used words like "we," the most egregious. In 2021, NBC News investigated a family court judge in Philadelphia. The findings are public. Judge Lyris Young failed to file opinions in multiple cases within the mandatory 30-day deadline. One case stretched to approximately 260 days. Families with custody of children at stake and waiting for the single most important document the court was supposed to produce. Waiting, because it wasn't filed. The Pennsylvania Court of Judicial Discipline stepped in. Their official language: this was the most egregious case involving rude demeanor, failure to timely proceed, and imperious action the board had seen. 2 of the reviewing judges argued she should have been permanently removed. She was suspended for 6 months without pay, and then she returned to the bench. One mother in that NBC News investigation said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about since I first read it. She said, "Never in a million years did I think our justice system was like this. Never did I think that judges were doing this and getting away with it." That one took me a long time to sit with. And here's what makes that one case a data point rather than an outlier. NBC News separately reviewed Judicial Conduct Commission data across multiple states from 2016 to 2020. Thousands of complaints filed against judges every year. Roughly 1% result in any public discipline or resignation after an investigation is opened. 1%. A Reuters analysis found that 9 out of 10 sanctioned judges are allowed back on the bench. That is not a glitch in the system. That is a feature of the accountability structure for the people who hold the most power over your life at the most vulnerable moment in it. 3 different betrayals, 3 different villains, one thing in common: someone failed you that you thought you could trust. I told you about my friend, what happened to them, how I watched it from the outside with that particular helplessness, knowing something was very wrong and having nothing useful to say. That feeling stayed with me longer than I expected. I kept turning it over. Why didn't they know? Why didn't the people around them know? The patterns are documented in federal research papers, state court investigations, peer-reviewed journals. Why are they invisible to the people who most need to see them before they're inside the situation? That's where the anger went. Not only at the person who deceived my friend, not only at the system that failed them, though that anger is real and I'm not letting it go, the anger became a question. And this channel is the answer to that question. Not a legal service, not a journalism outlet, a research record made accessible to the people who actually need it. Every pattern I cover, every case I reference, every statistic I use, it goes through a research process before a word of script is written. Because the people watching this have been through enough. They don't need more unverified claims about a system that already confused them. They need what the record actually says. My friend eventually found their footing. It took longer than it should have, cost more than it should have, in money, in time, in ways you can't put a number on. But they came through. And in watching them come through, I kept seeing what had made the difference. Information, specific, sourced, delivered by someone who wasn't inside the process with them. Someone who could stand outside and say, this is the pattern you are in. This is what it's called. This is what the documented record says about where it tends to go. That's what I wanted to be for somebody else. Anyone else sitting where my friend was sitting. Some of the visuals you'll see in this channel are reconstructed representations of real documented events, created to give a face to stories that deserve to be seen. Every underlying fact is sourced and real. The cases are real. The data is real. The patterns are real. And so is the reason this exists. I want to go back to something I said at the very beginning. Remember? I described a specific moment. The one most people can't put into words. The moment the version of your life you had been living stopped being real. I said somebody was writing a different version the entire time, and you were the only one who didn't know. Here's the reframe, and I need you to hear this part. The person who deceived you, that was individual, personal, a choice made by one person about one relationship. But the reason it worked, the reason the legal process became a second layer of it instead of a safeguard against it, the reason the system that was supposed to see what was happening moved slowly or unevenly or not at all, that was not individual. That was structural. That was documented. And it was already in the record before your case ever started. Asset concealment in divorce and documented going back decades, the procedural manipulation named in legal literature, studied in federally funded research, the judicial accountability gap, 1% of complaints, 9 out of 10 sanctioned judges returning to the bench, published data. You were handed a situation with known vulnerabilities. And nobody told you what they were. That changes today. What I want you to leave here with isn't a strategy, and it's not legal advice. When I mean that genuinely, not because I have to say it. Nothing in this video is legal advice. Everything you heard comes from public record, court data, and documented case patterns. If you're in a family court case right now, please work with a licensed family law attorney in your state. What I can give you is information. What they give you is representation. You need both. You weren't failing to understand something obvious. You were inside something that was deliberately obscure to the people inside it by design. Knowing that doesn't undo what happened. But it changes what happens next. I said at the start that somebody was writing a different version the entire time. That you were the only one who didn't know. The second time I say that, I want you to notice it lands differently. Because now you know the pattern has a name. The research exists. You are not one confused person trying to make sense of something inexplicable. You are one documented point inside a system with known patterns, known failures, known gaps. And you just found the channel that's going to spend every video filling those in. Who failed you that you thought you could trust? That question doesn't go away. But now you know where to start looking. That's where we're starting. If your story belongs here, the link is in the description. Stays between us unless you say otherwise. I read everything. Take what you found tonight. Let it mean something.